Well, Algene, thank you so much for joining us today to talk about women's economic empowerment. I know this is an area that is important to both of us, and I'm so glad to talk about our shared passions, especially when we talk about women's empowerment and equality across our diplomatic and development efforts. So I wanted to talk specifically about your leadership role and what you're doing at the new Development Finance Corporation. So you all recently launched the 2X Women's Initiative, and this initiative specifically focuses on the challenges women face across the world in accessing market opportunities. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about what are those specific challenges that they're facing, and why is this initiative so important to DFC's overall mission?
Thank you, Michelle, for that really important question. And I just want to thank you for all the important work that you, Liz, and all of your colleagues really at USGLC do to advance women's economic empowerment across the globe, and especially in the developing world. Uh, you know, it's funny that you asked this question about the challenges women face because a lot of folks kind of think of it theoretically, but the data, you and I know that the data shows that women, especially in the developing world, but also in parts of the developed world, are still in 2022 less likely to have paid work, to hold management positions, to obtain an affordable mortgage loan or a loan to start a small business. And so since women are always the primary caregivers in most families, many of these existing challenges are only exacerbated by the pandemic that we've all lived through, the COVID-19 pandemic. And so it's really important to recognize that, and the data shows that. And on the flip side, when women represent an enormous opportunity, when we invest in women, because there's one way to think about it. If women are a single emerging market, that market would be twice the size of India and China combined. Think about that.
That's incredible.
Exactly. Incredible investments that help women access critical services and earn more income actually benefits not just the women themselves, but of course their families, but also their communities and even their country's GDP. So investing in women just makes good business sense. And I know that there are a lot of companies out there that are doing just that. And we're happy to partner with them in the 2X Collaborative. So as you mentioned, the initiative was started actually 4 years ago under the previous administration. And I'm just really happy to be here in this space to sort of continue the drumbeat of support for this initiative. The 2X initiative invests in projects that are owned by or led by women, or that provide a product or service that delivers a strong benefit to women. That could be anything from microfinance loans for women-owned businesses to affordable mortgages for female home buyers to expand access to clean water, right? So we can finance all types of transactions that really support the woman in various ways. When I think about the other part of your question, we're also working to expand our outreach to small businesses, women-owned small businesses, chambers of commerce, diaspora networks, so that we can really mobilize the US private sector to help us meet those goals.
That's just incredible. And your statistics are so compelling. And as you were talking, I found myself thinking, how could we not invest in this, right? It's having a huge return on our investment, not only in the development goals in these countries where we're working, but for Americans here at home and American corporations. So let me ask you this. I'm sure by now you've worked on this project, you've led it for over a year now. Talk to me a little bit about maybe a project you're working on under 2X that's really personal to you, something that you're really passionate about and really shows us what 2X is all about.
Sure. Well, I just want to sort of give you an overview. Some of the most of our projects are investments in women who own small and medium-sized enterprises. We know that those enterprises are the heart of emerging economies and typically where women are the most economically active. But beyond specific investments with women entrepreneurs and SMEs, DSC is considering the many ways that our work can really impact and improve the lives of women across all of our transactions. The agency's portfolio spans nearly 100 developing countries across Africa, Latin America, Indo-Pacific, Middle East, Eastern Europe, and Eurasia. So we're just about every corner of the world. And we really focus on lower middle income countries. So there are opportunities out there for us to work on gender equity really across the entire world. Um, DFC is also looking for more opportunities to meet marginalized women and underserved communities to maximize our development impact. We are really committed to fostering inclusive growth and maximizing those investments by leveraging our support with private sector, other private foundations, and other DFIs, development finance institutions. So we've been really impactful in that way. We're trying to really get at the bottom of the economic pyramid. So since 2018, we've really catalyzed $13.5 billion towards women's economic
Incredible.
empowerment. Yes, absolutely. We're so proud. And in FY21, we catalyzed 4.3 billion towards that goal. In fact, 43% of all of our transactions are, that we committed in FY21 had a strong gender component. So that's really critical. So I say all this to say it's really hard for me to choose one transaction because there's just so much innovation going on in the DFC's transaction teams that really focus at getting at that most marginalized group. And so I will speak to one project that really focuses on vulnerable populations and women-owned businesses. I think it's really interesting because it shows the opportunity for us to marry with humanitarian services, right? It's really cool. So last year, DFC provided $10 million in loans to the Near East Foundation to launch the world's first ever development impact bond for refugees. It's called the Refugee Impact Bond, and it funds NEF to deliver a vocational entrepreneurship and resilience building program for refugees and members of their host communities in Jordan and Lebanon. So this investment demonstrates really the power of partnerships as well, which is what we really pride ourselves on. As we launched this bond in partnership with the IKEA Foundation, Novo Nordisk Foundation, NORAD, FIRD, and Kaios. So that's really unique. That's what's really unique about our investments is that we really try to leverage all of the various different sources of financing, call it blended financing, in order to really have more impactful transactions. So what's unique really about this particular transaction, this particular investment, is it's results-based framework. And those of us who are sort of development geeks really get excited when we talk about results-based, right, Michelle? I mean, our donor partners really provide funding to NEF to repay the loan, and they provide a return on investment if the program meets certain impact targets, right? So in other words, think about this, NEF is actually incentivized to implement innovative programming that will maximize the economic impact of our investment for the women and families that it will support. And that incentive means that the more impactful the deal is, the program is, the more the NGO partners and foundation partners will pay in their loan repayment. So it's really quite interesting. It's a new, I know it might not be new, development finance bonds or investment bonds are sort of not new in the venture capitalist investment space, but they're really new to DFIs. They're
Sure.
really new and different to government entities working in this space. And I'm just so proud that we've been able to do this for the first time for refugee communities.
I have to tell you, as I'm hearing you give this example, and I'm thinking too, not only is it again doing such good things, right? But to your point, it's showing that when we have an investment in an area like this, we are seeing impact. We are able to quantify it. And I think how important that is, especially for people out there who still are kind of skeptical, right? It's like,
Yeah.
well, where are my taxpayer dollars going? And to what end? What does this achieve? And it's, systems and approaches like this that say, yes, it absolutely is, and here's how.
Mhm.
So another thing I've taken from this, and I love this kind of approach, is that, not only is it something the government's doing, you talked about blended finance, right? This is truly harnessing, right? The best of what the US government has to offer, along with the best of what the private sector has to offer. And truly this idea of partnership, right? Both coming in to meet goals and to increase these outcomes. You also touched on this great theme of bipartisanship,
Mhm.
noting that 2X started during the Trump administration, where I served, and now under the Biden administration, right? You are building on this, increasing the momentum. And we're seeing again that these are areas where we come together and say, not only is this the right thing to invest in, it's really the wise and smart thing to invest in to reach all of our national security goals, our global economic goals, and all of these things. So thank you for highlighting that. But now I want to ask you kind of a personal question. It's obvious you're super passionate about this topic, but this is an area you've long been involved in. And in fact, you have a podcast that we listen to along with many others. And specifically, I want to talk about the podcast when you talk about how important it is for women to support other women. And specifically, you have such wonderful stories and guidance about the importance of mentorship for women of color who are specifically striving for careers in politics and foreign policy. And I just really wanted to hear more from you. Why is it so important for women to support each other? How have you in your own career been active in this? And maybe even take a moment to tell us about some influential mentors in your own life.
Oh, well, thank you. That is an important question, and it's really one that's near and dear to my heart. I'll start with the second part first, because I talk about this all the time. Before I knew anything about international development or all of the humanitarian issues that I've worked on for so long, I was so fortunate to have a very strong grandmother
Mm.
who, she grew up in Liberia in 1930. Okay, she was born in 1930, and grew up in Liberia in a time where really her brothers and her sisters were really treated differently. She and her sisters were not afforded the opportunity to go to school past, primary school, but her brothers, went on to get pretty high level private education because her father just really didn't want to invest in the economic pursuits of his daughters. So she was a serial entrepreneur, always, and until I would say the week she went up into the sky to watch over me and be my protector. She was always sort of a serial entrepreneur. I mean, she was always selling or reselling household goods and crafts in Monrovia. She really was, while she was there, selling in the outdoor markets, etc. And she really, from a very early age, instilled in me like a very strong work ethic and also a sense I think I didn't put it all together, um, because I came to this country at 3 years old. But um, I think the sense of what women in the developing world, sort of go through in order to really access financing, in order to really be self-sustainable. I mean, she remarkably was able to start her own market, her own store, employed people, was able to send her kids, 4 girls and 1 boy, to private school for that tuition. And just that sense of I can do anything if I put my mind to it really came from my grandmother. And so it's all kind of come full circle, this opportunity to work on women's economic empowerment I've worked on it, I worked on it in the Senate, in the House before that, but to be able to really implement an investment program that's geared towards empowering women entrepreneurs like my grandmother, it just gives me such a sense of pride, and that my life, my career has really come sort of full circle. I mean, I can only think about and wonder what my grandmother would have done if she had a DFC. All the
Yeah.
things that she would have been able to achieve with that financing. And so that's really the woman who has sort of shaped not only has served as a mentor to me until she passed away in 2012, but also just shaped my worldview about women and work and self sustainability. And on my podcast, it's called the Minority Leaders podcast. I am so busy with my day job. I'm hardly able to work on it these days, but hopefully I'll have another episode out here soon, but there's a really wonderful catalog of episodes that are already out there that talk about the importance of mentoring, the importance of women supporting women. And the reason I felt the need to do this is when I left the Hill in 2020 after about 18 years, um, working in foreign policy and national security, sort of behind the scenes, writing the speeches and doing the research and writing the reports and the legislation, of course, and with support from other staff. But as I was doing that work, I found that I could write an amazing bill, but if I ever had to go and talk about myself, and I just clammed up. Or even when it came to briefings, I never wanted to put myself out front. Old school, I'm old school staff, old school congressional staff. It's all about sort of the putting the member up front. And that's important, but also being able to um, feel and understand your self-worth, and what you bring to the table in a meeting, in an engagement, in a hearing, et cetera, or briefing. When you're on the spot to represent the member, it takes a lot of self-assuredness that I think doesn't always come naturally for women of color, because we're often the only person in the room. And it can sort of feel um, like you don't like, what am I doing here? There's always sort of that sense of imposter syndrome that many of us face, even if we don't we act like we're completely confident. One thing that I find very interesting is that I often see men in these types of businesses, I mean, these types of settings, very confident, sometimes overconfident compared to the amount of knowledge and background and skill they have for the field, um, in the field. But women come to those conversations from a place of self-deprecation or insecurity that is really not necessary. And I think, when we think about the sense of self as a person, a Black woman, an immigrant Black woman who grew up not in a wealthy environment, coming over here as a political asylee and with, very meager means, to be able to being at the decision making table is important. It puts a lot on my shoulders, but I have to represent the people who come and have maybe my background or similar background to mine, who do not have the opportunity to sit at that decision-making table, or do not have the opportunity to write legislation that becomes law that can protect them, or can help feed their families. And so, yeah, I have to think about, and it's a heavy weight, but and so I hope there's more people coming behind me. I'm trying. I don't feel like I would have really done good in this career, done well in this career, if I don't ensure that there are more women like me at that table when I leave. But I have to think about the fact that, and I try to in my podcast point out that there is our diversity is our power. And we're here at the table because we we not only deserve to be, but our perspective, our different perspective than the 10 men at the table is absolutely critical to making good policy, to making good, fostering good ideas, um, to fostering creativity. It's critical. So, I think having that sense of grit and self-assuredness, but also just recognizing that you're there for a specific reason. It's something that I want to make sure that other young women coming up in this field understand and feel, empowered versus, um, I'll just leave it at that. Feel empowered.
Well, Algene, thank you for sharing all of that with us. And it really makes me think of, this passion you have for women's empowerment is really, at its foundation, a sense of responsibility that you seem to feel for ensuring that other women, especially women of color, have these opportunities, that they have their voices and that they're heard. And I just want to thank you for that. And I'm thinking of your grandmother and this the spark she has definitely created in you, and this role model she was for you, and what a multiplier effect that has been in all of the lives you are touching now internationally through your professional platform, but also here in the States, personally through your podcast, through the other empowerment initiatives that you have. And I just want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for, showing up both professionally and personally to empower women, and to really set that as the standard. So, Algene, thank you for this. Thank you for your work, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Michelle, and thanks again for everything that you and Liz and everyone else at USGLC does to empower women across the globe. Thank you.
Thank you.